We're back to the Neil Haley Show. My guest today is best-selling author Len Sciuto, author of Hades Crypt. Len, thanks for stopping by, and I'm excited about our conversation today.
Well, good morning, Neil, and I hope everything is well with you and all of our listeners. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for all of those who are listening that have considered buying the book. This week, the book is still on the bestseller list, and it's week 26. So I'm really surprised as to how well the book is doing. And those that have bought the book, thank you so very, very much. I'm working on the fourth book. It's called Desperate Countermeasures. And like most thrillers, for those of you who sort of analyze storylines and that type of thing, in every thriller, there are aspects of it that are dangerous. There's always a goal from the dangerous side of the story. So as you're writing the book, you identify the danger. It's demonstrated. It appears multiple times through the story. Then eventually it's eliminated. So if I use that information and I apply it to what's going on with Iran right now, I think there are some things that I think may be displayed as a sign of weakness. Now, when the war, and I'll call it a war because anything that involves weapons, in my opinion, as a military person, is a war. A conflict can be oral, it can be demonstration, but when you talk about weapons, and in my opinion, it's a war. After the military was eliminated by the United States Air Force, Trump identified and passed to Iran a 15-point ceasefire agreement, and they refused and displayed and delayed their opinion. And we know from past history since 1979 that they stall, they lie, they misinterpret, and they believe that they will keep their regime in power no matter what it costs. And in this instance, the cost is holding back the wishes, desires, and what's best for the population of that country. The other aspect that I want to mention is all of these little incidents that have occurred since the ceasefire, the blocking of Hormuz, the mining, the small ships attacking other tankers, all of these are happening, including a big deal that happened between Iran and China on May 4th. And the reason I believe that this country is continuing to do that is because the commander-in-chief of the United States keeps adjusting things, because he's not only the president and the commander-in-chief, he's also a Christian and a humanitarian. Those changes in the ceasefire, those changes in the criteria that's in the 15 points, the attacks that have been happening, in my opinion, are construed as signs of weaknesses. They say Iran cannot develop a nuclear weapon. Now, when you have the material, the nuclear grade material, and you want to enrich that, and you want to use it for electrical power, or to propel ships, or to use it for humanitarian purposes, over and above the typical humanitarian purposes, the enrichment that happens to that nuclear grade material is less than 4%. Anything over 4% is an indicator that it's going to be used as a nuclear weapon. And that's the key to remember. When they're talking about this nuclear material and Iran's not building a weapon, Iran is building a weapon. If that material is over 4%, there is a very strong possibility that's what they're doing. The other thing is they've been advertising that. So, and let's say since 1979, it's been death to America. They've killed, well, the last count that I saw was 2,900 Americans over time. And who knows what the future holds for the population of that country, and how many more Americans are going to be eliminated or murdered. Just to let you know, in the United States, when I was working at Vermont Yankee Nuclear Power Plant as a nuclear chemist, there were 113 nuclear power plants in the United States, and those have to be licensed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And that the reason I mentioned Nuclear Regulatory Commission is there are two organizations that nuclear power plants are affiliated with. One is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is the United States, of course, and the other one is INPO, I-N-P-O. That's India, November, Papa, Oscar. That's the International Nuclear Power Operators. It's an organization where information and technology is exchanged among countries that have nuclear power plants. So I wanted to mention that, and because that's been critical. And these two organizations are the main reasons, and the oversight of the federal government and the Environmental Protection Agency for storage of spent radioactive material are extremely important, which has prevented any type of typical accident since 3 Mile Island. And when you consider that, that's phenomenal. Now, with Iran, they have an Atomic Energy Organization of Iran. It's called the AEOI, Alpha Echo Oscar India. That oversees their nuclear power program. The reason I'm mentioning that is that it's Iranian, it's supported by the government, and they may not necessarily be telling you the truth. And we know that Iran's congressionals, or whatever you want to call them, political organizations don't exactly tell the truth. So that's the nuclear side of things. Now, recently in the news, if you've been watching the news, we saw Iran in Beijing, China, having a meeting. And we don't know what the information was passed between those two countries. But one of the things I mentioned in a past podcast was that China does not have a lot of nuclear resources, not of natural resources. Those natural resources, I'm talking about crude oil, natural gas, and precious metals. Now, the snake, which is the countries that oppose us, has 3 heads: Russia, China, North Korea. And a year or so ago, maybe a little bit longer, Iran became the 4th head of that snake. And one of the agreements that was made with that, one of the other heads, which is China, was to sell them crude oil. Now, I mentioned earlier in a podcast that Iran, when it sells oil, sells it between $90 to $100 a barrel. The agreement with China was that they were selling Chinese oil to China $20 a barrel. In exchange, which our intelligence group found out, they were swapping sodium perchlorate, which is the rocket fuel propellant, and missile components to Iran because the oil was being sold to them for $20 a barrel. Now, on May 4th, let me backtrack just a little. Let's talk about the Straits of Hormuz. When all of this started, the final trump card, in my opinion, that they had was closing up the Straits of Hormuz. And right now, the way things are going, President Trump is trying to hold a delaying game. And I don't think that that's going to resolve the issue. And the issue is the possibility of them creating a nuclear weapon. somebody said today that they believe, based upon their information, that Iran has never had the intention of building a nuclear weapon. That, in my opinion, is baloney. Anytime you go above that 4%, and you get it to 60%, or actually the lower limit is something like 40 something, that's a nuclear grade weapon. And they've advertised it. That's what they want to do. So there's no mistake about it. Their goal is to create a nuclear weapon. Now, with the Straits of Hormuz, because of the I'll call it stopgap measure, that's a choke point. So I mentioned earlier that the maximum width of the Straits of Hormuz is 21 to 22 miles. The depth of it is not that deep. It's only like 250 feet or a little bit more. So even the VLCCs, that's very large crude carriers, and that ship carries 2 million barrels of crude oil, whereas the typical tankers that you see carry between around 30,000 barrels of crude oil. So when all of this happens, the channel that they've been talking about, channels, as I'm sure you've been reading about and hearing about, that channel is only 2 miles wide. So what the United States has been doing has been escorting ships in and out, and they've been very few and far between. The out portion is the one that's been few and far between, but there's thousands of ships in there, and I'll get to that in a minute. So on May 4th, and this is the reason why Iran had a meeting with China, Chinese-owned oil products tanker was attacked in the Straits of Hormuz, marking the first reported incident involving a Chinese tanker. Now, that's important because China, being a supporter of Iran and one of the heads of the snakes, is that they've tried to stay out of all of this. If you notice, they've been sitting in the back seat, but they've been helping and supporting by riding in that back seat and not having it advertised by either country. They were providing intelligence information. They've been trying to get military components in, but they need the oil. They're strapped for crude oil for what they need to support their country and their military. So now the location of this incident was off the coast of the United Arab Emirates. The vessel was identified as a Marshall Islands flagged oil products and chemical and gas tanker called JV Innovation. And they marked on the ship, so that it was clear to be seen, China owner and crew. Now, when this ship was attacked, it was attacked by missiles and drones. That ship was set on fire. Now, there are no official confirmation about injuries from the attack, but there's a significance to this event, and that was it was the first recorded strike on a Chinese oil tanker in that region, breaking the pattern where China vessels, or Chinese vessels actually, had largely avoided direct attacks while only Western ships were targeted. And we know what those ships were, anything that wasn't Iranian or affiliated with the other three heads of the snake. Now, the Strait of Hormuz, as we know it, is a critical global choke point, and it handles just about 20% of the world's oil and gas shipments. The attack occurred as President Trump announced Project Freedom. This is the attack on May 4th. Okay, that's between Russia and Iran. And it was to assist stranded ships, the Project Freedom, to assist stranded ships in the strait. But the plan was suspended within 24 hours after Iran launched the missile and drone strikes on ships and the United Arab Emirates. The incident coincided with Iran's imposition of new transit controls via the Persian Gulf Strait Authority. Now that's also just like the AEOI, their own organization. Persian Gulf Strait Authority is Iran. And that organization required detailed vessel declarations. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. And restricting routes, which has sharply reduced maritime traffic. And we obviously know that. Maritime Security reported that as of the last time I looked, which was a few days ago, there was 1,600 ships that could possibly be held up inside that pocket. And it could be up to as many right now as 2,000 ships. And they're all awaiting for the opening of the straits. On those ships, there's an estimated 20,000 seafarers on those ships, maintaining those ships. And they're all trapped in the Gulf. So the traffic has basically been halted because of what's been going on. Now, I mentioned the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, and I'll identify that for you. It's a newly established Iranian government agency that was launched on May 5th, which was after this attack, to control, tax, and regulate maritime traffic in the Straits of Hormuz. It acts as an Iran-controlled body that requires ships to register for safe passage and pay tolls for passing through the Straits of Hormuz. But I have to say that you don't see many of them doing it because of the crisis that's going on in there. Now, the other aspect, the next thing I'd like to mention to you, is since the initiation of Operation Project Freedom and the preceding naval blockage and the traffic through the straits, it's plummeted down to only 5% has been allowed to leave through the straits. When you think about that, if there's 2,000 ships, that's only 200. That means there's 1,800 still in there, if that's the number. And it's going to take a long time for those ships to get out of there and get back into the Persian Gulf, take on oil elsewhere, and then bring it back to their own countries. Now, the turning those ships back, Central Command, which is a base in the Middle East, the headquarters for Central Command is right here in Tampa, Florida, and I live in Florida, by the way, confirmed that on May 6th of 2026, 52 ships have been directed to return to port or reverse course. So the United States Navy has enforced the blockade, kept those ships from trying to get into or get out of the Straits of Hormuz. The reason many of the ships haven't even attempted it is because of the conflict that's going on between us, Iran, and the United States. And the fact that Iran is using small boats, and now, after the May 4th incident, drones and missiles on ships. But also, we've read about and know about the mine-laying aspects of what's been going on as well. And the United States Navy has been using its minesweepers to clear the mines out of the ways to lay some of the ships to get out. Now, the other aspect of this is along the coast of Oman now, there was a transit route to allow some of the ships to get out. And I think I have the number in farther down on my outline. While the United States has attempted to escort select vessels during Project Freedom, traffic remains at a trickle compared to pre-war transits. And usually, prior to this epic fury, the average number of ships coming through the straits was between 100 to 120 ships a day. So if that's all that can get through, as an example, let's say that's the accurate number, you can figure out how many days it would take to get all those ships out of there. Now, I said there were 52 vessels that have been turned away. I also mentioned that there are somewhere between 1,600 and 2,000 ships still stranded on the opposite side of the Straits of Hormuz. And the number of vessels attacked right now to date, including the Chinese vessel, has been 22. That's the number. Now, why was this attack so important and pertinent to not only China but Iran? This attack undermined China's strategy of its using China owner and crew marking on the outboard side of the hull of the ship. And those markings were used as a shield from direct conflict, signaling that even neutral flag Chinese vessels are now at risk. So China is in the same boat that every other country is in right now. And I think the meeting in Beijing, when I saw it, I went, why the heck is this going on? And my first thought was, they're asking China for help and support to see if they can figure out a way, earn the money to support their government, to downplay what's been going on between Iran and the United States. The attack on that ship, by the way, was by Iran's IRGC, and you know what that is. Their component, I'll call it a Navy, but it's more like, as we know, it's all small boats. The attack was by Iran's IRGC Navy and has since been declared safe corridor and warned of firm action against ships deviating from the approved routes. That's what the reason the ship was attacked. It was not in the identified routes by Iran, not by the United States, which is one of the routes that the United States has been using to transport those trickle of ships that have been able to get out. Excuse me. The other thing I'll mention is the attack by Iran on that Chinese vessels further tightened the control of the straits. The United Nations has warned that prolonged disruption could pull up to 45 million people, the population in some of the population in Iran, of hunger, the possibility of hunger, famine, and their fuel prices are going up as well. Now, in summary, the May 4th attack on that Chinese tanker was both a symbolic and an operational blow to maritime security in the Straits of Hormuz. Anytime any ship is attacked in there and there's damage and death, it's a deepening of the crisis in not only between countries, but in the global energy supply and the escalating tensions between Iran, the United States, and China. Make no mistake about it, China is an adversary of the United States as well. And I won't get into that during this podcast. So let's take the key details. It was identified as a Chinese vessel. She carries some liquefied gases, and she's a crude oil carrier. The attack set the deck on fire. And China has been a major buyer of Iranian oil, as I mentioned, and this attack highlighted not only that no ships, I guess I should say, were safe during the heightened tensions. Now, how did China respond? I think that meeting in May between Iran and China was a diplomatic one. The foreign minister of China, Len Sciuto, announced that Beijing would continue to work for the de-escalation of the situation in the Straits of Hormuz and would make, quote, utmost efforts to protect the safety and security of Chinese ships and her crews. So if any Chinese ship is attacked again, you know what's going to happen. They're going to defend their ships because it's considered part of their country. Now, the context of the attack. This was the first time a Chinese-owned vessel was targeted since this war began. And right now we're in like 60 some odd days, 64 maybe. And China has continued to call for a complete ceasefire and has expressed, and I want to emphasize these two words, strong disapproval of the United States blockades and the military actions taken in the region, labeling them as dangerous and irresponsible. Ongoing strategy, I'll mention, is despite the attack, China has continued to rely on diplomatic efforts and discussions with regional parties to ensure the stability of energy supplies and the safe passage through the vital waterway. Now, the reason I'm talking about all of this, especially this incident, is irregardless of how this happens, it is a clear demonstration that even ships that are allied to the country of Iran also, and I'll say again, also, can come under scrutiny and fire and disapproval by the country of Iran. The total number of ships in there, and you look at the videos and you see these smaller ones. What you want to look at is the ships that have a bulbous bow. That's what they call it the nose of the ship. On the bow of the ship, that's the forward portion of the ship. And what we call an after house. You'll see a flat deck, and then you see an elevation of the ship on the stern of the vessel. That's where the bridge is. That's where the living quarters are. That's where the engine rooms are. Now, you have to remember that the United States, on one particular vessel, because she was trying to break the blockade, that American ship immobilized the engine room. There are a variety of ways that you can do that. The primary one is you send a projectile through the hull.
So Len, we are getting closer to wrapping this up. We definitely probably need to have a part 2 of this too. This seems so you're concerned about the Chinese, then it sounds like.
Yes, that is exactly right. As I mentioned earlier, they own 222,000 acres to 325,000 acres of land in the United States. They produce immeasurable different products that are manufactured in China. They have to have their oil and natural gas. Those acreages are predominantly around military bases in the United States. They're continually monitoring what's going on in the United States. And we talked about those balloons from way back when. They were identifying missile bases, missile silos, okay? And the big concern I had was when this meeting happened in Beijing, that Iran was asking China for military support. And if that happens, you know what that means. It no longer becomes epic fury or a conflict. It becomes an outright war. And that really bothers me, and that scares me. Yeah, so yes, you got to worry about all 4 heads of that snake.
Exactly. All right. So I guess we definitely are going to have to cover something earlier in next week for sure, to continue the conversation. But people can pick up your book very easily, right, Len, by going to your website?
Yes. Website. There were 3 books: Tango Down China Sea. That's the mission I was on in the Black Sea against the Russians. The second book is called The Devil's Delegation. I was an operations officer in Desert Shield and Storm for the Coast Guard. And then the third book, Hades Crypt, is between Russia and the United States in and under the Arctic Circle for protection and defense of the natural resources in and under the Arctic Circle. The book I'm currently writing is called Desperate Countermeasures. That is What happened to me is I got recalled back after being retired 5 years for 3 years of active duty by Coast Guard back in D.C. And there were 14 government agencies that were put together to write a specific specialized contingency plan. In the book, those 14 agencies authors that created this plan are being kidnapped, tortured, and then murdered by a terrorist group. Their intention is to get all of the information that's in the contingency plan, to neutralize it, and then attack the United States. I'm 34 chapters into it. The last chapter I wrote, I incorporated drones into the story. So that's kind of interesting.
All right.
I can't talk about it now because we're running out of time, but I saw one in operation, and it's being used to clean Spanish tile roofs. And it's kind of interesting. So we can talk a little bit about that if we have time next week.
All right. Sounds good, Len. Thanks again, and sign off our listeners.
Well, thank you so very, very much. If you have any comments you'd like to make or discuss anything, I have a website, jlensciuto.com, jlensciuto.com. And also, thank you so very much for buying the book, those of you that have. And those of you that haven't, please consider doing that, because 2/3 of the book royalties go to junior enlisted people in our military, E1 to E4, because those are the ones that have to do what we're talking about. Take care, and God bless you all.
Thanks, Len.
The United States of America. And thank you, Neil.
You're welcome. You're listening and watching The Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.